at the start of day 2, Berlin Wall Trail, and that's where I left off last night. So I've just walked the 2 miles from my hotel to here, and it is now about 8:30 in the morning on the 12th of February 2025, and it is -4 degrees at the moment, so it is a very chilly start to the day. It's freezing actually. So as I said, I've just finished the 2 miles to get here, so that leaves me with 18 miles to go. It's a 20-mile day, so quite a big one. And there is actually a bit of snow forecast for later in the week, so I'm going to keep an eye on that. So this is a very large, imposing industrial facility, and it does look older than 40 years, definitely older, but this is the ex-death strip that I am walking on now, so it must have been here. It must have been right up against the wall. So I'm walking along this goods line, which I just saw earlier, and it seems you're allowed to do that here. I mean, it is only a goods line, but still, this very much reminds me of Stand By Me, the film, Will Wheaton, where they're looking for the bodies. I mentioned it when I was looking for hawthorns where it fell. It reminds me of that, but I can't follow it for much longer because it's veering off. So I mean, I started the walk heading east for about half a mile, half a mile, and then I switched and headed north, and this will continue for the majority of the day, with a little bit of sprinkling of northwest thrown in for good measure. But I will reach the most northerly point of this walk about 3/4 of the way through today's route, and then I will strike west a little bit to Hennigsdorf, I think it's called. I mean, what is for sure going to happen today is I will essentially leave Berlin and be out in the sticks. At some point during the next hour or two, I should see fields, farmers' fields.
Berlin. City of difference. A city of balance. A city of Albrecht. The city of Brandt. A city as a cultural extravaganza. The city of sand. A city of dust.
And then, as if by magic, fields appear. That is the outskirts of Berlin here. And I will stay on the outskirts for the next 4 or 5 days before heading back into the centre again on day 6. So they look like old bits of wall left discarded. Yeah, I am really out in the sticks now. And it's just so strange to think that I am walking on what was a service road in the middle of a death strip with walls either side of it. It's just so eerie and strange to think. I mean, I've read so much about it over the years as well. It's just, it's heavy, shall we say. It's heavy. So it was still -4, very, very cold, and there is a wind, there is a breeze, shall we say. It's more than a breeze, it's a bitingly cold wind. So I am having to keep hold of my camera in one hand when I'm not using it, just to keep the batteries from dying, and I'm having to do the same with my little microphone as well, just to preserve power, really. And I've got plenty of power backup, but it's a faff getting it all sorted. So I'm just trying to be careful. So I am just walking through this kind of wooded area, and it is offering me a little bit of protection from that biting wind, which is very welcome, I have to say. About a quarter of the way through today's section. I have 14 and a half miles to go, and it's not even 10 o'clock yet. It's about 9:30, 9:45, something like that. So yeah, feeling good, making good time, and long may that continue. Touch wood. I'm not being rude. It's just that cold that the cold wind on your face, eventually your lips don't work properly. So I'm just protecting them with my little buff. Yeah, I've got no problem at all doing a trail like this in the winter. It's, you know, it's flat. Berlin is flat. It's, unless there's really thick, deep snow, there's not really going to be an issue, I don't think. So, I mean, as I might have said, I've been to Berlin several times before, and it's one of my favourite cities in the world. I love it here. So, my notes on yesterday's experience walking around central Berlin are that it's not quite as well maintained as it was. I think when I came here in 2013, just after the financial chaos, the Euro crisis, Berlin was looking fantastic, gleaming, well kept, was clearly running at 100% of its efficiency still, even with the crisis. Everything was just so well maintained and kept, and it was lovely. Still a giant construction site back then, it has to be said. Lots of things not quite finished, but you just had the sense that you're in this incredibly prosperous economy, and that living standards were just going through the roof, and had been for a decade or so. So I came again in 2017, and I noticed a slight degradation. You know, it wasn't quite 100% efficiency, shall we say. It was kind of like 95%. Still brilliant, still looking amazing, but a little bit grubby around the edges in some places. There was a lot more graffiti than there had been, and a little, you know, it was just a little bit less well kept. Well, I noticed yesterday that it has degraded quite a lot again since then. You know, I did a walk in 2013, went to certain places, did the same walk again in 2017, and I went to the same places again yesterday. And, you know, I would go as far as to say some of the areas were looking like they were on the edge of poverty, in fact, which was quite shocking to me. I just never thought I would see that in central Berlin. But I did see it. And some of the estates around the Hansa studio area were looking a little bit worse for wear. Yeah, I noticed them distinctly because I photographed them in 2013. So, you know, like an apartment block or complex that looked like a fantastic place to live in 2013 didn't look like such a great place to live in 2025. So, you know, not the 100% efficiency of 10 or 15 years ago. Still 90% though. Still very, very high. But it's having to tighten its belt a little bit, shall we say. And that's not a surprise, really, because Germany have been footing the bill for many, many bailouts. You know, starting with its own. You know, I'm on this Berlin Wall walk, the front line that divided the east and the west. So when reunification happened in 89-90, the whole of East Germany needed hundreds of billions spending on it to bring it up to grade of the West. And that needed to be done. But I think now, if you talk to some people, maybe that project was a little bit heavy-handed from the West. And we are seeing the results of that now, maybe in some of the dubious election results. Being liberal is great, it's all fine, well and good. It's a good way to be. I'm a liberal myself, but sometimes the patronising language of rich liberals can be intolerable. If you ask most people, they cannot stand being talked down to. They'd rather be punched in the face than talked down to. So, most of the election chaos that we are witnessing in the world is because of that, in my opinion. It's not because the right wing have fantastic policies or anything. It's more to do with the catastrophic failure of the left. What do we have over here? So, it's like a very sandy area here. Yes, very sandy. This landscape that I'm walking through is a pretty good example of basically abandoned death strip. Most of the death strip was just left to nature's devices and was slowly reclaimed by it. Mother Nature, that is. So, the death strip was very wide in most areas, good 30 or 40 metres. And it's difficult to see it when you're walking through it, but if you look on Google Earth, you can clearly see where it was. Running all the way around West Berlin. Very clear, because even though nature has reclaimed it, young trees look very different in colour to old trees. So when you see it from above by satellite, you can see the strip of no man's land very, very clearly. Yeah. So this is original service road, I think. Looking at my little app, this is a piece of service road that ran directly through the centre of the death strip. It's predominantly a kind of cycle path. I have to watch myself that I don't get run over. It's difficult on a walk like this. I'm trying not to be overly political, talk about left and right. I just don't know what that means anymore. I personally don't think it really exists now. I don't think there is such a thing as left and right. I think we've all splintered off into our little subgroups. People on the opposing sections of the left are more against one another than they are against the right. And certain people on the extreme left and extreme right are practically the same. I mean, humans are political animals by their nature. The ancient Greeks knew this, which is why they invented democracy, so that people can be political and debate and put their arguments forward. But I have to say, I think in terms of the internet, the over-politicisation of the internet is one of the great tragedies in modern times. All that matters is that you tell the truth, you know. You can't have a democracy unless people tell the truth, so... So, I mean, I will try to be as kind of objective as I can when it comes to talking about politics. You know, you just can't avoid it on a walk like this. It is the most political walk probably in the world. You cannot avoid this, you cannot avoid talking about it. So, but I'll try to be as fair as possible. I'm now walking through a very quaint housing area. These are all very nice houses. They look owned. When I say owned, I mean a lot of Germans traditionally have kind of lived in rented accommodation. You know, rentals are a big deal here. You know, the property owning democracy is very much a British thing. But from what I've heard, it's kind of on the up here as well. You know, just more and more people here want to own their property. I mean, in the UK, you know, everybody wants to own their property because they don't want to give all their money to dodgy landlords. But I mean, in terms of landlords in the UK, I mean, really, the UK economy is geared specifically for landlords. You know, landlords are keeping the economy going. That's all right in one sense, but it's no good if you're trying to get on the property ladder. If you are a young person, you know, you just can't do it anymore in some areas. I think this is the first generation where our young people will have less than their parents. And what a tragedy that is. It's that old Greek thing again. The ethos. Leave the place in a better condition than where you found it. And, you know, those are the rules. We've generally been doing that over hundreds of years, with a few side steps and back steps along the way, but generally we've made progress. You know, this is a more than a side step. This is a backward step that we've been taking this last 10 or 15 years. Things have definitely gone backwards. I'm not on the exact footprint of the wall right now because these trees are older than 30 years, so must be down here somewhere. Treehouse as well. Probably on Airbnb. So 10 miles in and 10 miles to go. So far so good. touch wood. I mean, I can actually see blue sky now. Wow, blue sky. I need to enjoy it whilst it lasts, because apparently tomorrow the weather might take a turn for the worst. So there's a 65% chance of snow for tomorrow afternoon, all afternoon. Snow or rain, which one of the two? But with this temperature, most likely snow. I just hope that it's not deep snow. I've got some long days ahead of me. The last 2 days is 50 miles, 25 miles a piece. So I don't want to be trudging through loads of thick snow, really. I'll have no choice, I'll have to do it. So, I mean, I've been walking for several miles through this kind of residential area in the north of Berlin. It's all post, most of it seems post 1989. There's a few older houses dotted around, some older trees from older avenues. But I am generally following the footprint of the old wall here. You would just never know it was here. It is gone completely. But I do think this area is pretty much the most redeveloped area on the route. So in a short while I will get back out onto basically the outskirts of the city, and it'll be countryside again. We are now coming out of the urban air environment and back into the countryside. Once we get past this rather massive complex, residential complex, I think it is. Very impressive. But all I see before me is a forest track. forest. Amongst some very fast growing trees again, it seems. No evidence that there was ever a wall in this section, but it is a very nice section. This is my favourite part of the day so far. It's absolutely beautiful in here, and I've seen a couple of people in the far off distance walking their dogs. But aside from that, nothing, no one. Just me and the birds. I am about 12 miles in so far. Feeling good, touched the wood. And I think it'll probably be something similar to this for most of the rest of the walk for today before I get to my hotel area. See, frozen solid. Can I walk on it? Yeah, I don't think it's quite thick enough to skate on. So, and I didn't bring my boots either, so. No Torvald Dean for me, I'm afraid. Well, as much as I would like to skate on the ice with the Bolero playing in the background, I feel it's important to strike onwards, north. You know, what I have noticed is that in some areas the official Berlin Wall trail does deviate slightly from the actual no man's land death strip. I hate calling it the death strip, but that's what it was. I mean, I can tell now that I am in what was a no man's land. As you can see, it's quite a distinctive landscape. That's a nice little cobbled path at the side, but this is the actual no man's land. I mean, there's a lot of sand and stuff in it. So here, this is the actual service road. If you can see, service road. So if you follow the signposts, you will, skim the edges of what was the death strip sometimes. But I was aware of this before when I was plotting out the route. I could see the death strip from the map. You could see it. The newer trees are a different colour than the older trees, and you can clearly see what was that no man's land area of the death strip on Google Earth. So I plotted my route along that. So I know it deviates slightly sometimes. Yeah, like I said, I would much rather walk on the remains of what was the death strip. Just my personal choice, really. And I can actually feel some heat in that sun. It's nearly 1 degree now. Wow. Now swing left. So, in about 20 minutes I'll be arriving in an area called Hennigsdorf. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Mr. Woodpecker. Which is where I was going to stay the night if I'd decided to do a big 25-mile slog on the first day, which obviously I opted against, thankfully. Now I've done the walk, I am so pleased that I did a smaller walk on the first day. Treehouse over there. So yes, and Hennigsdorf will be the most northerly point on the route. It will be under 8 miles to go before I reach Hennigsdorf, I think it's called, where I will find my hotel and a bed for the night. I'm now heading west along this asphalt, modern asphalt road or trackway, and the death strip is just over there, that forested area. And I'm not going to complain too much. I'm quite alright walking along this asphalt track because there is something here to my right of interest, and it looks like an original watchtower that's been converted into something else. Wow. So there you go. So that's what it used to be. You can see it there. All this death strip here, service road. So I am on a service road here. It's just been re-tarmacked. GDR security forces used to wear those really weird kind of futuristic Nazi Wehrmacht helmets that were like a modern interpretation of an older variant, but they just looked really kind of weird. But what I later found out is that they had actually been the intended successor to the more familiar Wehrmacht helmet. So basically the GDR got hold of the moles and just said, let's just use this. The GDR uniforms kind of very much like still had that Hugo Boss feel to it, whereas the security forces in Western Berlin went a totally different route and basically started wearing Americanized uniforms. what people sometimes forget is that Germany was and is a fully paid up member of what we call the West. So all these conflicts that have been happening in Europe for hundreds of years, just fighting each other, it's just like the West, like a family, fighting each other, treating each other terribly, even though we're a family. It's not that the rest of the world isn't a family, it's just that, the West is like siblings, brothers and sisters, where the rest of the world are like second cousins. I think the historian Michael Wood said it best. In his quote, actually wrote it down, and he said this: and there is the inescapable lesson of history, is that for all the great achievements of the West, for all its humanistic values and egalitarian principles, its character is touched by a deep strain of violence. And no truer words have ever been said about the West, really. Even just from my country, the British, scrapping for the last 1,000 years, basically, with a couple of weekends off in between, for peace. America, they're just constantly in conflict somewhere. And it was the same on the continent of Europe, France, Germany, Spain, Portugal, all the stuff that went on in Greece and Italy. It's just violence, ultra violence. I think generally, it seems so obvious that we're just so similar on the continent of Europe. You come to Germany and you walk around the small towns and villages, and they're so similar to the small towns and villages in England. They're so similar to the small towns and villages in France and Belgium, and yet we treated each other terribly, terribly. People don't just wake up one morning and go, come on, let's start something. There's always a cause and effect. Things grow and fester. Bad choices get made. Regardless of what anyone says, life is mostly about the choices we make. You can't account for all the idiots. So, civilization again. So just heading north now a little bit, and this is pretty much the most northerly part of the route now. And here we are in Hennigsdorf. I've kind of reached and gone past the most northern section of the route. I'm now kind of heading southwest towards Hennigsdorf. This kind of whole sector that I've been walking through today was, for a time, the French sector. So the French governed this little section of Berlin after the Potsdam Conference. The Allies, in their wisdom, decided they would split West Berlin just give East Berlin to the Soviets, no problems, no questions asked. And they would divide the west half of Berlin into 3 sectors. The French sector, of which I am in now, the British sector, and the American sector. How do we get to the point where we are building walls through cities to separate our neighbours and family and friends? What causes something like that to happen? Well, I'm not smart enough to answer that question, but what I do know is that such things are caused by a combination of factors. A bit like an air crash, a plane crash. It's not one fault that causes the plane crash, it's a multitude of factors. Mechanical failure combined with, say, weather, combined with, say, pilot error. It's not one thing that makes a plane fall from the sky, it's several things working together to cause a catastrophe. The Berlin Wall is a direct result, really, of the Second World War. And not many people will deny that the Second World War had to be fought. It had to be fought. Hitler was a maniac. The Nazis were a brutal dictatorship. And they had to be stopped by hook or by crook. But, the Second World War was caused by something else, another factor, i.e. the First World War. And the First World War, unlike the Second World War, should never have happened. It was an absolute waste of time, absolute bloody lunacy. Millions died, for nothing. And the leaders of all those nations involved should have had their heads placed in a guillotine, if you want my opinion. There were other factors as well, like an economy like Germany's being suppressed and unable to work properly and causing enormous inflation. People were giving up their life savings for a loaf of bread. So, as we well know, if you take things away, money away from normal, everyday working people, you can expect trouble. If living standards fall and continue to fall, people look for someone to blame. People get angry, people get bitter, and they get mean when money's taken out of their pockets and when families can't feed their kids. Of course that happens. How could that not happen? But I think the biggest one was the big financial collapse of 29. That was really the nail in the coffin, and Hitler and the Nazis saw a gap in the market, as it were, and they just went for it. And they appealed to all the worst aspects in human nature. A family of nations fighting each other. Europe. The continent of Europe. Like I said yesterday, the true front line in what was the conflict that descended into the Cold War, Western capitalism versus Soviet socialism, communism. the front line of that conflict was Berlin. Along the front lines of this very wall that I'm walking along here, X wall, the X front line in the Cold War. Really, in my opinion, the Cold War was the craziest. It was crazy. I mean, it's just absolutely nuts. And it wasn't so much the body count, it was just the mind games and the ideologies. It was a different kind of conflict. Just even talking about it makes me depressed. How did it go from that to Germany being this ultra progressive, ultra high tech kind of futuristic society, of which you dream about in like Star Trek or something, because the closest thing Europe has to a city of the future is probably Berlin, as I've said. So how did it get to that? How did that kind of ultra progressive Berlin come into being? Because straight after the Second World War, the people that were running Germany wasn't so much the British and the Americans and the French. I mean, we had oversight and the presence here, military presence most of all, and of course we brought our civil services to help out, if you can call that helping out. But mainly Germany was being run by people that had been members of the Nazi Party. Nazis, basically. So you might say, well, why did the British and the Americans and the French allow Nazi Party members to take over and run Germany after the war? And the fact is, there was no one else to do it. Hundreds of thousands of men were held in captivity in the Soviet Union, and everybody else was dead. So it was either old men or young boys. Most of the old men were Nazi Party members, basically. Of course, they shuffled in some key figures from the left who had been opposed to the Nazis all along and had been living in exile, like Willy Brandt, for instance. So Willy Brandt was really kind of the founding father of modern Germany, specifically modern Berlin, because he was the mayor here post-war. So, of course, Willy Brandt wasn't an ex-Nazi. In key positions, people who had been opposed to the Nazi regime were brought in, and they had to work with these other people, these bureaucrats from the old Nazi system, because there was just no one left. There was no one else to do it. So they aren't responsible for creating this futuristic, egalitarian, progressive country. It wasn't them. Of course it wasn't. So who was it? Well, it was the children of those ex-Nazis that built Germany. And basically rebelling against what their parents did and being disgusted by what their parents did and saying, no, we're not going to sweep this under the carpet, we're going to face this head on and build a new country in our image. I think that moment when Willy Brandt went to Poland and he went down on his knees and asked for forgiveness on behalf of his nation. I mean, this was an innocent man. He did it anyway. It was one of the most incredibly moving things you will ever see a politician ever do, is to shoulder the burden of his nation on his shoulders and do what he did. And I think that when he did do that, and he did kneel in Poland with his head stooped, he did it with such integrity that it was beautiful. And that day, I think, he reclaimed Germany as a force for good in the world, no question about it. I mean, did you ever see Tony Blair or George Bush get down on their hands and knees and ask for forgiveness for 1 million dead in Iraq? No, you didn't. You didn't even get an apology. Standing up. I think I have about 6 miles to go now. So, and it's been a lovely walk. I've really loved today. I mean, I loved yesterday as well, but I was kind of feeling it yesterday. I was quite tired and achy. But today I felt really good. And I'm just enjoying the scenery. It's beautiful. So, Death Strip. I think let's take a walk in the Death Strip. Edging closer and closer towards the end of the day anyway. thoughts on liberalism. I said earlier that I was a liberal, and I am, even now. But, inspired by that post-war generation of young people who maybe took a look in the mirror and took responsibility for their actions, or their parents' actions, their parents' generation's actions. I mean, I'm generalising, we're all guilty. But very few were guilty, in fact, always the case. Good people do evil, and evil people can do good. And there's a whole spectrum in between. But, it's just the whole good and evil thing is bullshit. I'm totally with Niall Ferguson when he said that all wars are evil versus slightly lesser evil, and I think that is true. But I stick to what I said earlier. Sometimes wars do have to be fought, unfortunately, but it's still organised murder on both sides. That's what war is. It's organised murder for political purposes. Let's have a look. Oh, not of course. Yeah, so I'm getting quite close to the end now. About another mile. Oh. So there was sort of a checkpoint in this, just down there somewhere, some sort of checkpoint. Probably a military checkpoint, maybe with some civilian access, but there's the main one, the main entrance by road into the old West Berlin is in the south. It's past, down near Potsdam. So that was called Checkpoint Bravo, as opposed to Checkpoint Charlie, Checkpoint C. It was Checkpoint B. So we'll see Checkpoint B, Checkpoint Bravo, on the second to the last day. That is a 25-mile day, that. So to do 25 miles and loiter around Checkpoint Bravo, and also the original Checkpoint Bravo. There was an original checkpoint which was used up until I think about 1969 or 72, I can't remember off, but it was used. Then it was replaced by a much bigger site. So we'll visit both of them. We will visit both of them on that penultimate day. It'll be a long day. But I mean, if you're into your, Berlin Wall military infrastructure and what's left of that, that's probably the day for you. Episode 5, I think. All goes to plan. So that stop sign behind me is trying to tell me something. So this little sign here is the end of my day's walking. So this very nondescript corner is the end of day 2 of my Berlin Wall trail, and I will be back here at first thing in the morning to start day 3. So for now, I will just say I'll feed the same pets and see you tomorrow.